President Deland?
Do you want to eliminate the requirement that all 30% of differential tuition has to go to need-based? That's going to require legislative action. So I think at some point you've got to decide if you want to take it. Maybe you want to wait till the next session. Do you want to try to allow tuition to float up or down to market rates to give that flexibility to the universities? Yeah. Do you want to tweak Bright Futures? And that may be just leave that with the legislature to make the call what they want to do, or the governor. Do you want to eliminate some of the restrictions on the funding streams? Do you want to eliminate the legislative restriction on that student fee trust fund? That's pretty simple and mechanical, I think. And so at some point, you've got to have a directive to the chancellor and the chancellor's government affairs team. What are we going to pursue with the legislature on the funding component? I think there's plenty of time to deal with some of the, the ways to enhance STEM. There's plenty of time to deal with how do you want your strategic plan to look like those 8 measures and sub-measures, because that probably will take some workshop and discussing and that kind of a thing. But I think the more immediate press would be the policy calls on the funding possibilities.
Governor Rudin?
First of all, John, thanks for the brilliant job you did on this. I thought I'd throw something your way. 2 thoughts I have. One, it seems like we've got a lot of things going on here, and there's a timing issue. Would this be something that the Strategic Planning Committee might want to take up in a month and bring together thoughts that come back from the various boards of trustees? So that's an idea. I'll just throw it out there. The other thing I think is important, especially after yesterday's discussion where the faculty weren't really brought along. Now, I think it's great that you were a part of this discussion, but rather than just going back to the Board of Trustees, get input from the faculty and make sure that we're not going to be surprising anybody down the road if this does start rolling out. But with this year's legislative session, we've got a tight time frame.
Right, since session starts in January. So I like the idea of having the Strategic Planning Committee kind of take the leadership role in this. I can look to yourself and to Frank to see whether you want to take that on and kind of maybe have another maybe meeting by phone to discuss it. Maybe your committee can do that, but you also maybe can take some time, or at least take the lead on actually looking more deeply into the information that's been presented, and maybe make some suggestions about whether we should expand it or not, and then maybe make a recommendation to the full board. And at the same time, each member will have all the same documents, and can also have an opportunity to review and add or delete. Governor Hussaini, then Governor Tribb.
One thing that I think is also important, I think the governor is also very interested in the education. I think he is really looking to us to go back to him and say, okay, we've looked at it, we've looked at what you send us, you have a concern. He basically, there's nothing new with him on everything. He says, nothing is a status quo. We want to look at the efficiencies. We want to make sure our kids get jobs when they graduate, and we want to have more jobs in Florida. In order for him to get his $770,000, he wants to have more graduates can get a job. So I think governor or his office should be very involved with this process, and he buying into this program that whatever we come up with.
Yeah, we have, when I met with the governor, actually had dinner with him in Jacksonville, he had his deputy chief of staff, and so we've given her a copy of the outline as well as the PowerPoint, and discussed. At that point, we had it pretty well framed. And I think you're right, Governor Hussaini, the big interest the governor has is job placement. And, but I think we need to make sure that people understand the significance and importance of the research activity that we do as well. That's really critical long-term to the future of the state. And so, again, I think there's thematically, we want to convey, liberal arts are critically important. We do need to be responsive to jobs. We do need to make sure that we are in the STEM area, that we're responsive so that we don't fall away. And then we need to try to liberate internal finances to be able to move those needles.
Well, that comes down to what a governor asked me is why is it the colleges can per student per credit hours, can deliver half as cost of the university. This is the governor. That's a long answer. Research and the amount of work that gets done into university system is different than colleges. They have a great mission, and it's a wonderful mission, and it's something that I think the 2+2 program we have is one of the best in the nation, but we have a different mission.
Well, and I think the educational experience is significantly different for the student as well, for the most part. That often gets overlooked.
Governor Trim?
I'd like to go back to where I started from, and I'm not sure it's there. Their considerations say efficiencies, effective recession, closing centers, dropping degrees, one size does not fit all, Board of Trustees provides tighter management. I don't know how we make any next step without including the boards of trustees who we have asked and who are doing, I think, a great job in now managing with the executives the individual universities. And if we don't take this to them and get their input, then I think going the next step to the legislature or the governor or anybody is not going to work. We need to come together as a system, and they are on the ground day to day the most important part of each single university's actions. And so maybe I need to make a motion or ask, that we go forward and now ask them to take this and come back with their thoughts.
Yeah,
By either appointing a group of them or asking the board chairs somehow to get it there. And I'm not trying to remake the wheel, but it's like we're moving around. I do not want to go to the legislature with moving these ideas that I'm sort of hearing now that, we've got some great ideas. Let's go to the legislature now and say no more 30%. Let's do this kind of funding, et cetera. I don't think we've built the groundswell that we would need to do if we were going to take on that kind of measure.
I mean, just as a short response, we haven't, we certainly are considering your concerns. So don't think that we've gone beyond that. We're just going through the process. And let's see, I guess it was Governor Martin, then Chancellor, and then President Benz.
I guess to follow up on Governor Tripp's request, is it possible for us to have maybe WebEx and let John lead, and have all the trustees dial in, call in, whatever, and go through this presentation and then ask for their feedback? I think that by John heading up this, committee.
Kind of like a webinar.
A webinar,
Yeah.
right. And that's something that can be easily set up very, very quickly. As I think time is of essence, that we need to get, a response back from them. And maybe the universities could either have a meeting on each one of their campuses, or the trustees that cannot come on campus, maybe can dial in or whatever. That way the information gets out almost immediately in the next couple of weeks. And then ask them for feedback and give them a time, certain date to get back to us. And John, what do you think about that idea?
Yeah, I think we could do that. I think maybe the simplest way is to ask if the presidents will get it out to the board members and let them see it, and the presidents can discuss with the board, and then maybe to go ahead and conduct a call-in or something like that to get reactions and input. And I'd be happy to be on that if you wanted.
Chancellor Brogan.
I think the thing that we have heard consistently throughout the orientations we've done for our new Board of Trustee members is always the same. It is, gee, we'd like the opportunity to do this more often, to come together and to have the chance to collaborate and discuss the things that are affecting all of us. I think this is a great opportunity to do that. I think if we charge each Board of Trustees with not only becoming educated as to what's here, but also having their own dialogues first at their own institutions to get a sense of where they are as an institution on this approach. But also remember, the boards of trustees, we're fortunate, have not only a general population, have faculty and students at the table representing the faculty and the students of the institution. So when you do hear from the boards of trustees, if it's done appropriately, you are also hearing from faculty and students in this process, recognizing there are broad constituencies represented by each of the boards. So I think where this is going is great, and I think if we can kind of organize the approach to this, and I think there was a very good idea about first take it to the institutions, let them chew on it, then bring the institutions together, chew on it collectively. I think it can speed the process of dissemination of information and then retrieving consensus on where we go.
So what we'll do is we'll place this in the hands of the Strategic Planning Committee. And if you would take into consideration all of the comments and thoughts from the members of the board and from the presidents that you've received today, with the idea that by January you can come back with some type of report. I think that that gives about 2 months for us to circulate it, for you guys to come up, have the webinar. And then I would also ask that you may also work with Chancellor Brogan in developing next steps. That is that, so we all agree on this, but if there needs to be a task force to deal further with funding issues, or if you also could consider it's going to be some big press release from the local boards and the Board of Governors, whatever your recommendations on how we roll this out is also something I'd ask that your committee consider. So we good? Any other comments or direction or thoughts that you guys would like to give on this particular issue? Yes, Governor Corr.
With some trepidation, I'm holding myself back from making a comment, but I guess I can't. Just respectfully, and I mean this in a positive way, this just feels very lazy to me. I mean, I'm again, brand new. I'm sure I don't have the history, but I feel like this is incredibly powerful, critically important. It's on the tips of the business community's tongues every day. And we have a lot of things here that we could take immediate action on and get the ball rolling faster with more momentum than chew on it at the local level, give it to a strategic planning committee, let's see what happens in January. I mean, I think if we were performing like this in my business right now, I wouldn't have this, that we'd be breathing much more heavy than we are around this table. It just feels too passive. And I'm just surprised presidents aren't throwing tables over, hitting their hands on the table, telling me, give me my performance metrics, make quicker action on these things we talk about but don't move on. So respectfully, just feels a little lax to me, okay?
I guess in response to your concerns, and I'm glad you put that on the table, is that it kind of goes into some of the comments we heard yesterday, and that you do want to, and what you would do in your business is that you would, before rolling out something big, you would kind of touch base with your constituents. And unfortunately, I don't know if we can do that as quickly. I mean, I guess for us, I guess in government time, by January, it seems pretty quickly for us to touch base with our constituents, make sure we're all on the same page, and kind of roll out in January. We're just only talking about 60 days. So what I'd like to do, kind of based upon your particular interest, is that since as one of, let's go ahead, and point you to the Strategic Planning Committee. Right. So then that way, yeah, exactly. I mean, which I think is great. So you can have immediate involvement and helping to push the system, push the process along.
You ought to see what she does to you when you miss a meeting and get tired.
But then that way,
It's very smooth.
that way we can, I think the idea of coming back in January really does give adequate time to make sure that we're all on the same page, and that at least those things we can agree upon, we can move forward with.
Yeah,
President
I
Lane,
make a
President Benz.
couple
Sure.
suggestions. The kind of the first page or two really is sort of an attitude setter in terms of how we need to discuss where we've been and how we're doing. And I think this slide is incredibly powerful when you that in conjunction with the increase in graduation, the increase in graduation rates, the increase in research activity, in the face of a 10 to 12% budget cut, with that number that low, to have that kind of productivity is something. And so what one suggestion would be to have the metrics portion go to strategic planning, but have the staff see if they can assemble a template that reflects those 8 measures, and then go back over the last 5 or 6 years so we can see trend lines in those particular things.
Absolutely.
I think
that's excellent.
I think the staff then, I'd give them the second heading, which is the strategies to increase employability, which is to address some of those reporting things that we're talking about, both data to the students and the reporting out. The staff can come back, I think, and deal with that. Then ultimately, I think it's a policy call on 3 and 4, which is, do we want to deal with Bright Futures in conjunction with, that one probably needs a little chewing, and I think strategic planning makes some sense on that. But I think the funding piece, I mean, the legislature starts in January. They're opening in January. And if we want to try to free up some of this money this year, that probably needs a little more quicker decision. Now, we may not be ready to do that yet, or the board may not be ready to do that. There may not even be unanimity of opinion among the presidents as to which of these we ought to do, but that one would seem to be a little more time-stressed if you're comfortable in dealing with the funding piece.
President Benz?
Well, I want to focus on the end. Where are we really going and how do we need to get there, but what is the end? I think the end needs to be a group of people that represents the legislature, higher education leadership, the governor's office, higher education leadership there, higher education in our different components, faculty, staff, students, boards of trustees, and the board of governors. I think somewhere there needs to be that group of people at the end sitting, because who can make decisions and enforce them and make them happen, to sit down and say, this is what we need to do and this is our plan. Because then they all walk out of that room, whether it be a retreat or whatever, they will all walk out knowing what they want, and everyone has their responsibility on how they're going to get there. From universities to governors to the Board of Governors and the governor. Higher education is on the tips of everybody's tongue right now. And we all need to get together, and I think this is why President Delaney and our work group is so important. At least now higher education has spoken. And that's very important to all of the people that are in higher education in this state. So I think that we need to, as we all read the documents and think about it and talk to our boards of trustees, what is the end? Who's in the room? How are we going to get it done? Everybody's got to be in the room with a vested interest. I just want to, my opinion, is that we need to keep that in mind as we move forward. I don't think the legislature is going to go in higher education from enrollment-based funding to outcome-based funding next year. They'll make some tweaks. There's some things that have to happen. But that is where we're going. It may be in 2013 that that decision is made and the plan comes out. But we all need to be aware that there is change. These are the players that need to be on the same page. We don't need to develop something to give to the legislature. We need to develop something with the legislative leadership and with the governors, the state governors' leadership. I think that's what we need to keep in mind. This is my opinion.
One thought, well, Governor Yost, go ahead.
I would just encourage that we make sure the faculty involved at the universities, so obviously there's faculty representatives on the boards of trustees. We don't have a lot of time to roll that out, but let's make sure the faculty involved in this too, so that we're on the same page at the end and have buy-in on whatever we do.
One thought is, I'm sorry.
And I'd just like to say, in addition to the faculty being involved, we're talking about funding sources that directly affect students, especially the 30% differential tuition, that students need to be involved in that decision. So I would like a little more time to discuss with the FSA on that issue specifically.
So what would be great, Governor Long, is if you could some sort of way kind of use that between now and January timeline as well to talk with your student body presidents about what we're looking at, as well as, and then kind of stay in close contact with staff and with Governor Martin's committee so that we kind of know where everyone is. I mean, at the end of the day, it's very likely that we will not all agree on all of the issues. So we also have to decide how we're going to deal with that. One thought was that we peel off the funding part and put it over in the Legislative Affairs Committee so they can possibly look at that issue while the Strategic Planning Committee is looking at the other policy issues. So why don't we plan on doing that? Is that so? I guess the current committee structure is certainly going to be in place until January. So if you would, Dean, take your committee and try to work with that part of it, and then Frankie work with the other policy issues and kind of come together and may make sense. Governor Hosseini.
Madam Chair, you know, I like Mr. Kaur, I like to move on, like my business. You know, we make quick decisions, we're on our way. But if we did that, you will have the same problem as we had yesterday, that we didn't have everybody on the table. You know, the faculty, the students, the universities, the board of trustees. You know, we want to get everybody's input. The last thing we would, because it will come time where whatever decision we make, somebody will show up and says, you didn't ask us. So I think this will give a time to bring everybody, all the stakeholders to the table and make the decisions.
Okay, so we're straight?
I think,
President Delaney.
I don't think it's necessarily up to the board to have to decide today on how to how to involve the boards of trustees, the faculty, and the students. And I think Frank and the staff can probably come up with an approach that addresses, the board's expressed what it wants to see happen, and I think that's kind of the staff work to make sure that those are brought into the loop. Input is provided, and background's provided.
Okay. The one thing I don't want to get lost in this is I like the idea of the 5-year look back and the curve. So please make sure that staff is on point on providing that information in support of both of the committees. So are we good? We kind of got our marching orders? You think we have it covered, Governor Tripp?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just say one last thing.
Sure.
One of the greatest assets we have in the state and higher education are the boards of trustees. And when they're inclusive and when they support our issues, they can do wonderful things. They're appointed by the governors. They're appointed by us. So we have direct communication with them, and we need to make sure that we include them so that what we're doing is everybody's on board with it.
Here, Governor Hosseini.
Madam Chair, I really think that one thing also is very important. We need to get the Chancellor and our staff really involved with this because that's their day-to-day job. And they really, our Chancellor ought to play like a conductor, and make sure that all aspects of this issue get vetted and gone to the Board of Trustees, to the faculties. And so when we get together in January, Madam Chair, we get our Chancellor and his staff, really bring it to the table, a lot of these choices, and make sure we've been everywhere. So our Chancellor, he be a conductor and getting everybody.
The beauty is we have representative government. Governor Tripp pointed that out last night. We have broad constituencies who elect or select their leadership, and I think if we use the existing structure, whether it's working with the President's Council or working with our governors who represent all of their students and faculty, to make sure that there's a direct line up and down of conversation through this thing. With our boards of trustees, and Bob, we've kind of been talking around you, but I talked to you this morning about the pleasure you had last night of having dinner with some of the other board of trustee members from around the state, and how much they want to be involved, not just at their institution level, but they really do, through that, want to help chart a course for our whole state university system. So working with those boards, et cetera, I think we can do this and end up with something that we can all, at least through consensus, embrace, but know that it's been considered by all of the broad constituency groups.
Any further comments? Thank you, President Delaney, President Barron, President Bentz, President Bradshaw, and Dr. Yost for your involvement with the project and setting the parameters for the conversation. We appreciate all of your hard work. With that, I do want to extend a very special welcome to Senator Maria Sachs. Thank you so much. You're welcome to bring greetings if you'd like. Come to the podium.
Never offer a politician Madam Chancellor, and I want to welcome everyone to Boca Raton. This is my beautiful area of the woods, and I'm so happy to be here. Especially, I started here as a state representative when Chancellor Frank Brogan was president of the university. Gave me a big push and a lot of motivation and inspiration. Thank you, Chancellor. And now I'm so proud to have President Mary Jane Saunders as our president here at FAU. She does so much, not only for the university, but for the people of Boca Raton and Palm Beach County. And I want to just leave you with a short message. I've heard talk about you coming to the legislature and how difficult it is. And it is difficult because of our representative democracy that the Chancellor was talking about. But I do say one thing, that if there is going to be any economic recovery in this state, if the state of Florida is going anywhere else, if we can ever reinvent our state of Florida, which I truly love, raised my family here, it's going to start right in this room, because the economic engine is in our public universities. So we look to you to start that engine and to make sure that innovation stays in our public universities, because we as legislators, whether we're representatives or whether we're senators, can't get the engine moving without the right labor force, without a high-tech university system to get us there. So I know it's hard, I know it's difficult, but it's challenging and we need you. Keep up the good work. And I know we see Chancellor Brogan up there so often, they're beginning to call him governor, you know. He's always there working the halls and the state senate. We appreciate the work that you all have done, and I'm especially appreciative of President Saunders. But I ask you, please keep this challenge very seriously, because if ever we needed your minds and your inventiveness in getting the public university systems going, it's now. It's now. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
No, thank you so much for joining us. The next item on our agenda is will be the election of our officers. And before we do that, I thought that I would kind of rearrange the agenda just a little bit and just make a few comments before we actually go into the election process here for the change in leadership for the Board of Governors. This very likely could be my last meeting because my term expires on January the 6th. And certainly we know that as appointees of the governor's office that you have an opportunity to continue to serve until the governor appoints a replacement. But there is a possibility that that person could be in place on January the 7th. So I thought that I would just take a moment to, as a part of my comments, to reflect a little bit on the opportunity that I've had to serve, and particularly with the pleasure that I've had to serve as the chair of the Board of Governors. Someone once told me that one of the best ways that you can offer community service in the state of Florida is to serve on the Board of Governors. And I think that for Governor Core, who's just joined us, I think he's already getting that the work that we provide in this position is certainly some of the most meaningful work to the state of Florida. It impacts our government, it impacts our economy, it impacts our students, it impacts our families. And if you think about all the other volunteer service that you do, I bet you will not find an organization that provides more than what you actually give and what you give back than what you can do with the Board of Governors. I think I'd also like to note that along with my term, we do have other governors whose terms will also expire. And again, it may be that they may be reappointed, or they may, again, will certainly have to serve until a person is identified to replace them. But just note that on January 6th, that Governor Duncan and Governor Marshall and Governor Martin will also have their terms expire. So just in case, for some reason, those persons are not given an opportunity to continue their service, I would like to just say a few things about them. I think that Governor Duncan has championed so many projects during her term that I think that it appears that she works more for the Board of Governors than she does for personal business.
My husband would agree.
Exactly. She's advocated shared services and finding efficiencies across the university. She served as the chair of the Academic and Student Affairs Committee, and she's worked to build greater coordination across the university system and course offerings and ways to bring adults back who left the university just a few credits short or shy of a degree completion. I think that is a great program, and that certainly that you can put your stamp on, that we're actually reaching back to our citizens who are so close to having completed their degree and finding a way to get them back into the system. You've also championed improving services to veterans and getting them to come back to school. And, the energy and the commitment that you've had to the board is just really cannot be paralleled by any of us. And I would just like to say, if we can just kind of stop and give you a round of applause for all your hard work. And believe me, I know we see her here, but I know the presidents talk with her when we're not in meetings. I mean, she comes to see you. I mean, so she really, really is involved with all branches of government in the interest of improving higher education in the state of Florida. I also would like to say a few things about Frank Martin. All of the hard issues that we dealt with this year have been a part of the Strategic Planning Committee. And it's because of Frank's leadership and dedication that we've been able to accomplish some really big things. You know, was always really big on strategic planning. I mean, he's a planner by nature, and it seems that he felt that the idea of having this whole committee as a whole as a part of the strategic planning committee was just a bit much. And so he asked if he could have a smaller committee, and he felt that he'd be in a position to take on the really tough issues that we have to deal with as a board. You have guided very thoughtful discussions on a number of occasions. I just enjoy your leadership style and that you have a very quiet and persistent way of bringing us back to center and ensuring that we address the very difficult issues. People may not realize that, you know, in Frank's position, he travels all across the country dealing with national transportation issues, but he always finds time to continue his responsibility and work with the Board of Governors. So, Frank, I want to say thank you, and I'm hoping that the governor will look to the important things that both you and Ann have added to the system, and may see a way to have you guys continue. But certainly, just in case he doesn't, just know that we thank you and that the board will forever have the stamp of your good work. And so, if we can give you a big round of applause. And the other person is Dr. Marshall. I'm sorry that Dr. Marshall could not be with us today. He's been a great member of our board. He was in a very unique position in that he's the only member of our board who also has had the honor of serving as a university president. He was the president of FSU in the 1960s and 1970s, and we relied upon his understanding of academic programs and really how it feels to sit in that chair. He led the Academic and Student Affairs Committee as it reviewed complex university proposals for new PhD programs, and we certainly appreciate all the work that he's provided to us. And the only reason that you know that Stan is not here is just because of his health. But he certainly participated in the briefing and was certainly aware of the issues, and I know he may have had an opportunity to call in on yesterday, but if we could also give Stan a round of applause in his absence for his hard work, I'd appreciate it. You know, just a couple things. I guess if I had to report on what's happened since we were last here, I think I asked Mikey to count it up. I guess it's been like about 56 days since our last meeting in Miami, which has been about 8 weeks, and I probably am not exaggerating when I say at least 50 of the 56 days I had to think or touch or do something that was related to getting ready for this meeting. And so certainly, and it wasn't just me. I mean, that's the kind of dedication that all of you had to play in order to, for us to deal with the tough issues. So I know that it is evident from the very healthy discussion that we had on yesterday that we were very thoughtful and really put a lot of time into the very tough decisions that we had to make. One thing I recall from our retreat, it was that there was this whole push that we need to man up as a board. There was some concern that as a board we didn't always stand up and address some of the tough issues. So what I attempted to do during my opportunity to serve as the leader of our organization was to ensure that we would not overlook big white elephants in the room, that if there were issues that we needed to tackle and take on, that we as a board would come together and do that. And it wasn't always at the direction of staff. I mean, I think Frank sometime would say, well, can you pull back a little bit? But it was my belief that, we have a constitutional responsibility to take on some very tough issues, and that when we saw that they were coming down the pike, that we should put ourselves in a position to make some tough decisions. So I want to thank you for dealing with me as we kind of did that, because I know it wasn't always very comfortable, but I can feel very confident. I can confidently say that we did stand up and take on our constitutional responsibility. We're very thoughtful and deliberative, and that we did address some very tough issues. So just know that maybe you should be careful about what you tell your chairs to do. If you, if you tell your chair to man up and make some tough decisions, and know that it's very likely that your chair is going to take that direction. And I'm certain that's going to be the case with our next leader. I also would just like to thank the staff again for all the hard work that it's just put in generally, and also Chancellor Brogan for your great leadership and direction during my term as chair. I think that we're only as good as the folks who actually get paid to take on some of these issues. And it's because we have a great staff and a great lawyer and a great secretary and a great team behind us that we're able to accomplish this. I think that the last couple things I'd just like to say is that I appreciate the fact that that our governor is very interested in higher education. I think that it's important that that we have an executive branch that realizes that our state university system really is the economic engine for our state, and that it's because he has kind of continued the conversation from his seat that it really has put issues involving our state university system on the forefront of everyone's minds. So I think that it's given us an opportunity to step up and actually review the issues and provide input and show that, based upon the conversation that we had today, that we're prepared to provide the kind of leadership that we think is necessary to advance the system. So I know some may worry about some of the comments that he may make. Some of the faculty members may be concerned about, some of the strong positions that he has regarding different degree programs that we offer. But I think that the more that the governor voices those kinds of opinions, the more important our jobs become. And the more important it is that he knows that he has a partner in this agency that's willing to work with him, or in this organization that's willing to work with him and to address very important issues impacting our state. So please don't cringe. Just say, that's great, Governor Scott. We think that it's great that you're having this conversation, and here's what we think about it, and here's the direction we think we should go with those issues within our state. I'd much rather have that than have someone who isn't interested in how important the state university system is to the state of Florida. And then finally, I would like to report that I recently had an opportunity to meet with the faculty senate presidents in the last couple of months, and I thank you, Governor Yost, for inviting me to participate. The one thing I can say is that we have we have great faculty organizations on each campus, and that we have a great system in place. I am just encouraging, all local faculties to become more involved with directing the conversation about your job. I think that some people don't know how hard our faculty members work and how important they are to making our universities work. And so I'm just encouraging you, Governor Yost, with your leadership, to encourage our local faculties to become more vocal in the conversation about what is happening with their futures. I think that it is because we have not heard from them that we don't always know how hard they work and the dedication that they put into their jobs and the difference that they're making, considering that we're entrusting our best and our brightest to their care. So I want to thank you for your leadership and certainly encourage our faculty to become more involved in the conversation. With that, let's see, I've welcomed Chris. By the way, Chris, I can say these things about you. He is a veteran real estate developer with over 20 years experience. He is Executive Vice President of AECOM, leading its planning, design, and development business in the Americas. Prior to joining AECOM, he was at the St. Joe Company, helping to transform the company from a forest products business into a real estate operating company. He's been involved in the development of many mixed-use projects involving thousands of residential units and millions of commercial square feet. We welcome you to the board, and we're ready to get you to work right away. So let me just give you a big round of applause. Our next meeting will be at Florida A&M University in Tallahassee. It is scheduled for January 18th and 19th. Keep in mind that our legislative session starts in January this year, so that... The 10th, I believe. Did I give the right dates? Yeah. I did. Yeah, you're good. Okay, you mean the session starts on the 10th. I'm sorry. The legislative session starts January 10th, which means that we'll be very busy addressing many issues leading up to that. I hope that that we've done something to develop a greater camaraderie within our board, and that that because we spend so much time together, that you're feeling very comfortable with spending time with someone who's not just a board member but also your friend. And so I'm hoping that we've been able to develop greater friendships and that if when my time is over in January, that you remember that I am your friend, and that although I don't have an opportunity to come to your board members, I am certainly interested in staying in contact with you all. So with that, thank you very much, and we'll now go to the next item. Thank you all very much. Gosh. Okay. We're now on to, yes, President Genshaw.
Just wanted to say that on behalf of all the presidents and myself, you have been such an effective leader, and not only do we think you're a superstar, but how many chairs have you all had as a Board of Governors that does as much as Chair Parker has done and have twins? I mean, that's unbelievable. But we really appreciate all of your leadership. Thank you so much.
We're gonna fuss over the chair
Yes.
at the end of the meeting. So please stay at the end so we can fuss over it a little bit.
You guys are so kind. Yeah, and believe me, since I've been on the board, I guess I've been married, I've had twins, you know, gosh. Yeah. Well, yeah, I was going to say that too, but I thought it was ugly to say, well, yeah, you know, yeah. Okay, we're on to item number 5, which is election of officers. In accordance with board procedures, the board elects its officers at its last regular meeting of the calendar year of an odd number year for a term of 2 years. For the term beginning January 1, 2012, I am now opening the floor for nominations for the new chair of the board. Governor Frost.
Madam Chair, congratulations to you too. I'm dittoing what Judy said, and I know we're going to make a fuss about you later. But I would just like to, at this point, say thank you and open for nominations, Dean Colson, who's been your vice chair and I believe has done a terrific job in leading us along with you. So my nomination at this time would be for the board to consider Dean Colson as the next chair.
Second that.
Okay. I have a nomination.
Nominations be closed.
Second.
I was giving them time. Hold on. So are there any other nominations? No? So you move to close?
Nominations be closed.
Second.
And Governor Perez?
I just move we approve by acclamation.
So a motion on the floor is that we approve by acclamation the motion to have Dean Colson serve as the chairman of the Board of Governors beginning January 1, 2012. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
I want to fuss over Ava, and I want to be just like her, except for the twins.
Does that mean you want to get married?
It's a pretty tough group. Really is.
Very tough group.
I now open the floor for nominations for vice chair. Governor Tripp.
It's my honor to nominate Maury Hussaini for vice chair. He has clearly proven himself to be engaged, to be an effective board member, and will serve us well.
Second.
Okay. Governor Perez tops you guys all the time. I just want you to know. Just to be on the safe side, are there any other nominations from the floor? If not, the motion on the floor is that we move by acclamation the motion to elect for vice chair Governor Hussaini. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Great. Congratulations, Governor Hussaini.
Madam Chair, I already have a twin.
That's right. You have a set of twins. That's right. So I think he got you covered on that one. Okay. Would you guys like to have an opportunity to say something now? It's totally up to you.
I have a few things I want to say, but I think I'll say them in January. I'm going to talk about you for a few seconds at the end of the meeting. And the only thing I would like to say is I've been awed by you the last 2 weeks. And I've been awed by our staff. And the emails that I was getting Saturday night at 11:15 and Sunday and from our staff makes me know what an honor it is to follow you in this position. So, but I substantively have a lot of thoughts, but I'll share them with you all in January. Thank you.
Governor Hussaini?
Madam Chair, again, we want to definitely fuss over you, and I think we really ought to get together and do, I don't know if we want to both roast you and toast you, or but you have, as a leader, been so effective in your tenure. It's been unbelievable. You manage through the way you handle yourself is to tell somebody to go to hell, and when they leave the room, they feel real good about it. I certainly felt that way myself a few times. And thank you so much for everything you've done. And then we'll take that later on.
Thank you. I just would like to say that you guys are very kind, and I appreciate that. And it really is it's only because of you guys and because of staff that we've had such a great year. But the one thing I would like to say about the new chair and vice chair is that you won't find a more thoughtful leader than Governor Colson. I think that his experience at the University of Miami, his experience as the education czar under Governor Chris, and now his experience from the Board of Governors is going to serve the system well. And I think that the dedication that Governor Hussaini has and his experience with his other higher education boards, as well as his knowledge of the state of Florida, is just going to serve the board well. If someone asked me, I said, I think Maury would be great, but does he have the time to do it? And I said, Maury reads every page of the agenda. I think he makes time to do it. He went out and he viewed the site before making a motion yesterday. So certainly I think that you won't have a better team, and that we're going to just certainly soar to higher heights. So just want to say that. Now we go to item number 6. I'm going to call on Governor Duncan for the report from the Academic and Student Affairs Committee, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We have a couple action items that have been going through our committee, and the first item would be to move approval of the public notice of intent to amend Board Regulation 6.018, which is the substitution or modification of requirements for program admission, undergraduate transfer, and for graduation by students with disabilities. Is there any questions on that?
Any question?
So moved.
I had moved, I guess.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, Governor
Thank you.
Duncan.
Okay, the second item is I would move approval for a public notice of intent to amend Board Regulation 8.016, which is the academic learning compacts that we also discussed yesterday at our meeting.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
There were also several items on the consent agenda that were actions we had taken at our September meeting, just the removal of limited access status of several programs and a biomedical engineering allowing additional hours. If there's any questions on those, but they came through our committee. We also just, I guess to report out, did approve a couple PhD programs at our committee yesterday because of our rule of trying to wait one meeting before we take final action. Those will come back at the next meeting. And thank you, institutions, for doing them in a timely way that we didn't have to waive that rule and rush them.
Right. Thank you very much. Item number 7, Governor Perez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 2 actions out of the Budget and Finance Committee. Initially, as you recall, in 2010, when the legislature gave the board authority to consider new fees, they also required an annual report summarizing those new fee proposals received and actions taken by the board. On page 267 of our packet, there is a report that sets forth those new fees that were implemented in fall, the amount of the fee, the revenue generated, and those expenditures. I'd like to move approval of the 2011 new fees report that was approved by the committee yesterday, which will be delivered to the legislature and the governor.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. Governor Perez.
Madam Chair, we also met as a Budget and Finance Committee to approve market rate tuition proposals from 5 universities. I'll make them all in one motion. The committee approved them all individually. All but 2 received unanimous votes. So at this time, I'll move the University of Central Florida's Professional Masters of Science in Healthcare Informatics, FIU's 5 programs, Florida State University's 4 programs, University of Florida's 3 programs, and University of South Florida's 5 programs, and ask that my motion listing those programs specifically be attached to the minutes.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Right. Governor Perez?
Madam Chair, I'll have a motion to make with regard to the board foundation budget at the foundation meeting after this meeting.
Great.
That concludes our report.
Thank you very much. Item number 8, Governor Martin.
Under the Strategic Planning Committee, there were a number of items that we heard yesterday. Item 8A regarding adult education programs. As you recall, the University of Central Florida withdrew their program. We did have a joint proposal from Florida A&M University, University of Florida. The board was generally, in approving the program from the Strategic Planning Committee. They wanted the university to go back, shore up some of the costs and the numbers, but wanted to go ahead and improve the program and concept and ask them to come back in January. So we moved approval of the committee action yesterday.
Wait, I want to make sure I understand. Yeah, what did we, I guess, what was the actual motion coming out of the committee on that issue?
I didn't think there was a motion coming out of committee on that. I thought we asked them to come back, Madam Chair.
It was my understanding, and was Ari, based on the discussions yesterday, that we approved it from the planning committee, but we did ask them to come back and shore up the numbers that were presented in the presentation. Senator, be corrected if that was not the case. Committee? There was a vote, correct? Mikey, can you go back?
Mikey?
Yes, I made the motion that both University of Florida and FAMU to work on their numbers, plan it. They really need to work on that. And I totally understand that it may not work. That the cost is so high, it would not work. But I have to tell you, I was disappointed with FAMU. I have the highest respect for Dr. Ammon, that he has not already been in touch with the leaders of the cities and the counties, and I think they really need to go through that process. I think they could be a huge help for this program. And I think if we can get some of this funding, some of this private funding or city, county, and that would help tremendously to get closer to be able to offer this wonderful program.
I guess I thought, Governor Hussaini, that President Ammon said that because the funding was tied to job production, because it had come from the Economic Development Council, that he did not think it would transfer to the kind of program that they have now developed. I thought that was his response, because a lot of
He did, yeah, and I understood that, but I still think that it still is a benefit to FAMU. It still is a FAMU, and I don't. I'm not trying to just by any means to. We should have, or at least they should have tried to get with the city of the county. I still think there's a real good benefit to FAMU, which is based in Tallahassee. And I really encourage him to work harder, because spending $6 million for 12 students, I mean, that's a lot of money.
Madam,
that is that I really like to approve something. We really want at some point to approve something. So I'm really trying to push all sides to come up with a bigger plan, better plan, and a plan that we can live with, so instead of a plan that does not work.
Governor Perez?
Madam Chair, I do recall the motion, and Mikey has refreshed my memory. The motion was to approve the concept, but we did not approve the budget, the amendment to any of the numbers. we simply approved the concept of University of Florida and FAMU continuing to work together. I don't know if we need a board action to maintain that conversation, but that's what was approved yesterday. But certainly, it was not.
There was a motion. I made the motion.
You know, the motion was the concept, but not the numbers, not the
Oh, I
budget
agree.
changes.
Correct.
Correct.
So it was really the concept of encouraging them to continue to work together and develop some numbers that did work.
So then, Vicki, based upon that, does the full board need to vote on the committee's motion to approve in concept the relationship between UF and FAMU?
Yeah,
I mean, does the full board need to also vote on that?
right. It has to be voted.
No. Hold on.
I don't think so.
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. So based upon the recommendation of council, then we'll treat it as just a report out of what your committee did, but it does not require a full board of vote, a full vote of the board at this time.
Okay,
Okay?
very good.
Okay.
Moving on to, well, item 8A, was already covered yesterday, the USF Polytechnic, so there's no report out from my committee on that. On the item C, the strategic plan, it was presented yesterday in the committee meeting. Based upon the presentation from President Delaney this morning, I think in terms of the metrics, we need to go back and maybe take another pass in shoring up some of the metrics that have been identified in the overall plan. It is a final product at this point. We will be tweaking some of the language if necessary, but it is the recommendation from the committee to approve the plan as it stands. It will be additional work that will be involved with the other committees of the board in terms of funding, facilities. So this is an ongoing process. But I would like to say that as a result of the efforts for the past year, that we are in a very, very good position to finally have the adoption of the plan, especially under your watch. So I would so move that.
So we have a motion and a second regarding our strategic plan. All in favor, or any questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Great. Commissioner Martin?
Under item 8D, organize a system for success, there were a number of regulations that were noticed in our previous meeting. They had to be re-noticed because of the technical nature of them. The first one, Regulation 8.004, Academic Program Coordination, and in front of you is a revised copy of that particular regulation. Based on legal counsel, we did have to make a technical adjustment to what was previously sent to you in the board packet. It does not require renoticing, so we would ask for approval at this time.
Second.
Any discussion? President Matchin.
Of this regulation, I feel that a mistake has been made. During the rewrite of the existing BOG regulations that resulted in 8004, the unique land grant missions of the University of Florida and Florida A&M have been eliminated from BOG documents. So there will be no reference in any BOG document of this important aspect of the university's contribution to higher ed in the state. And I spoke early in the process about this issue and was essentially ignored. And then in July, I sent the planning committee a letter asking them to please fix it. And the response from Chairman Martin was that 8004 is not intended to address the issue of university mission statements. Which brings me to today, where I must ask the question of why, when you're not intending to address university mission statements in 804, are you eliminating the unique mission statements as land-grant universities of UF and FAMU?
I have two questions, and pardon me for, I guess, being a little bit confused. As far as where we are with the process, are we still in the, I'm looking to you, Vicki, are we still in the comment period, or would the comment period just be starting? or the comment period has passed?
They're being, this is final action today. They had been re-noticed at the September meeting for additional public comment, and they're before the board for final action for approval.
Okay. So, I guess in response to, I guess the question from President Matchin, I'm not sure who's in the best position to respond to his concerns about why, I guess, the work group decided not to address the land grant status of FAMU and UF in this particular coordination. Maybe you can speak to it,
Sure.
Chancellor Boca?
Please understand that President Matchin's request was not ignored. Ignored means never considered. If I had a nickel for every moment we spent as a part of this process talking about how to organize this language regarding the unique mission of each of the 11 universities, I would be a wealthy man. In this particular case, there was a determination made, at least to this point, that based on the status regarding land grant and or, if you talk to President Barron, statewide mission, which is another title that is used regularly, that those particular status, while very important and historical in the case of the land grant institutions, that this particular regulation was not the place for those, largely because what this regulation does is to basically say that all universities need to communicate not only with one another but with the system before making significant changes in academic decisions relative to placement of programs in other places around the state. It isn't just what it's called. It's an academic program coordination status. Now, having said that, also laid out in this process is the ability of a university who wants to install or expand or create an academic program in places elsewhere around the state to be able to first communicate with all the appropriate parties. But if it is ultimately determined that that is found to be problematic by the parties, that there is an appeal process. And certainly, as a part of that appeal process, which ultimately comes to the Board of Governors by way of this regulation, that those sorts of considerations should absolutely be made and looked at by the universities that we're talking about. But I guess to cut to the chase, while it is an incredibly important designation, can't be dismissed, and while it should be noted regularly throughout what we do, the determination was simply made that this regulation, at least in that regard, looked at all 11 universities regarding their unique missions and their unique circumstances. So it wasn't a case of ignore, not at all. How do you ignore the University of Florida and its flagship status and its historic status as a land-grant university? You can't. Those are facts. What we tried to do, though, was create a regulation that was even-handed, while also acknowledging that at some point in the process, when and if appropriate, that those sorts of unique status issues could and should be considered in what action might be taken at some point appropriate. So I'm sorry, I don't want President Matchin to feel as though his request was disregarded, because it wasn't at all. It was a policy issue that we dealt with. And then I'll end here. By trying to create an even-handed approach to this, we did have to look at the unique nature of each of the institutions and not overlook any of them, but recognize that when dealing with communication and integration and articulation and strategic planning, that we had to consider the system over each of the individual institutions' status in that regard in this regulation. But again, the land grant status is not philosophical, it's fact. and should not be disregarded as it relates to the importance of that status for both, as President Manchin mentioned, University of Florida and Florida A&M.
Any further questions or comments? We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Great. Governor Martin.
The second regulation, 8.009, educational sites. This was also coming from the previous meeting. There was all total about 3 regulations that we've dealt with over the past several months. So we would also suggest approval for this regulation as well.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Governor Martin.
That ends our report. Thank you.
Item number 9, Governor Beard.
Yes, ma'am. I would like to make a couple of comments about yesterday before I get into the 3 items that we're going to deal with, if that's all right.
Sure.
Madam Chair. Yesterday, I asked a couple of questions of the architects as to how they went through the process of, and how the University of South Florida Polytech went through the process of hiring architects. And where I was trying to go was the RFQ process, which basically allows the university to pick an architect based on their qualifications and doesn't get into the cost of those services until after the fact, after that architect is hired. And it's my understanding that Ann's committee on efficiency is going to take this issue on and maybe try to clarify it and make it a little bit clearer. And may come back to this committee. And therefore, I just wanted to make sure that the committee understood that was going on. And secondly, it's important that this committee understands that there is a team of architects over there, and one of the members of that team is the Alfonso architectural firm, and they're local architects that have done a huge amount of business with the state of Florida and always done it very well. And I didn't want to intimate anything to this committee that I was concerned or worried about. As a matter of fact, I think they will be the reason that that project comes in on time and on budget. So I just needed to make those comments to this board. We have 3 items in the Facilities Committee that we need to take up. The first one is a motion to amend the 2012-13 SUS fixed capital outlay legislative budget.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Governor Beard.
The second is to a motion to approve the draft report of the utilization study that was discussed at the meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Governor Beard.
And the third is a resolution requesting the Division of Bond Finance of the State Board of Administration of Florida to issue revenue refunding bonds on behalf of Florida State University Research Foundation.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Governor Beard.
That's my report.
Item number 10, Governor Hussaini.
Madam Chair, we did not have a meeting. We have one opening, University of West Florida, that we're going through an open period, and once that's done, we will have our committee and get it approved and bring it back to the board.
Thank you very much, Governor Hussaini. With that concludes our agenda. I want to thank everyone for your time and attention. I need to remind you guys that we do have a foundation board meeting that we need to cover. It should not take very long to deal with the change in officers related to the foundation. And I understand that Governor Duncan and Governor Stavros have to leave to catch a flight, so I'm so sorry that we didn't move faster. But
it's okay.
Okay.
Got a lot done this week.
Yes, we did. So if there's nothing else, then I'm looking to my left to Mikey. Do I need to do anything else? Okay, I'm going to adjourn the meeting of the Board of Governors and then call to order the meeting of the Board of Governors Foundation.